Very good Monday evening to you all. It feels like it's just been yesterday since I was here last playing Clock Tower. Oh, wait. Well, it's good to be back. We were here also with this little series 2 weeks ago when we were talking about Navian's scripts, the horrifying spectacle of public executions, and we're here again talking about another lovely new script which you can see on
Hooray.
screen right now. And as you can hear from that, I'm joined again by Navian, my regular co-host for this.
Indeed.
Good to have you with us. And today, our special guest, because going forward we will, most weeks at least, have special guests, is going to be Jamie Jams, who you will know from Tuesdays as my regular co-host. So exciting to have you with us.
Ooh, I am excited to be here.
How are you both doing today?
Doing pretty good, thanks.
Yeah, pretty busy, but pretty good.
Yeah, we're glad to have you with us, Jamie, because we've caught you in the middle of moving your entire life across a continent. So thanks for taking an hour out of your time to do this with us. We greatly appreciate it.
Of course. Always
Um,
happy to be here.
and frankly, yeah, I'm probably going to be going to sleep after we do this for an hour or two, because for those of you who may have missed the news somehow, I'm going to be streaming for 24 continuous hours, starting in 3.5 hours. So that'll be fun. And I hope, well, Navian, I know you'll be with me for most of it. Jamie, if you
Indeed, I will.
get an hour or two to pop in, I know you're busy, but it'd be awesome to have you there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we are going to be talking about this script, but first of all, let's. I'm sure. Well, as I say, I know that you all know Jamie very well, but let's go through the steps for those of you who might not. Jamie, hi. Tell us a little bit about you and a bit about your entry into this hobby that we all so enjoy.
Yeah, I this is good timing because I'm actually coming up on like roughly the 1 year anniversary of when I played my first game of Clock Tower. But yeah, I had always really liked like all sorts of different games, and especially with social deduction games. I'd played a bit of like Avalon and Secret Hitler in person with my friends, and when the pandemic started, a good friend of mine invited me to a group that was mostly some of his friends from school, and they had played a lot of social deduction games back in high school, and so he was like, "Oh yeah, like you and your partner should come and join, and we'll play these games." And so, like early pandemic, we were just staying up like all night long and playing like for Secret Hitler and then Avalon, and got like pretty into those. And I started playing more regularly, or like those particular games online, just because I was like, it's a pandemic, and turns out there are people all over the world who just want to play games and really like games as much as I do, which was great. It was a very exciting discovery. And I, had been playing those for a while, and then about a year ago, I was like fairly busy with work, and a friend of mine from the Avalon community, who also is very active in Blood on the Clock Tower and mostly in the text game scene, she was like, "I'm running a text game of Blood on the Clock Tower, just trouble brewing, like beginner friendly. You don't need to know anything about this game, but I'm gonna run this text game on my server." And I was like, "That's great. Like, I don't have time," and did not sign up. Like, wasn't paying attention to it at all. And the game had started, and I think it was like the day the game had started or something. This friend reached out to me, and she was like, "Hey, you're the one person who I know who I think would like A, really like this game, and B, hasn't already seen the setup for the game and isn't already in the game. Can you sub in? We need a sub." And I was just kind of like, "Yeah, sure. This sounds fun. Why not? We'll do it." I said I don't have time, but this is fine. It'll just be a nice casual, like check in every once in a while. And then so I was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll do it." And she goes, "Great. You're the imp." And I was like, "Okay, cool. No pressure. I'm now the demon. Need to figure things out." Apparently, all of the good players somehow already just know each other's roles, but like it's fine. We're gonna make this work. I think I was bluffing monk because that was the person before me had decided. But it ended up being a really, really, really fun game. We lost in final 3, I think. I got killed on final 5 and my Scarlet Woman got killed on final 3, but it was just like the most fun thing and I had a blast sitting there and trying to world build and figure out like, okay, like what's going on in this game? How do I try and propose a world where like I'm not the demon, but someone else is so that my team can win. But also like there's just so many things. And compared to games like Avalon and Secret Hitler, it was just completely like mind blowing and revolutionary because those it's like, okay, you have people who are good and they all know nothing and no one has any powers, and you're just like, a nice vanilla townsfolk, like which is fine. But the idea all of a sudden that you could take what's this sort of like basic social and logic puzzle and then just turn it into like, oh, actually, there's like 20,000 different things that you should be considering at any time if you want to actually like solve this puzzle and build the world that has the correct evil. I was like, this is so fun. I need to do this all the time. Um, so that from there, they told us about the unofficial server, and I joined that and started to play some games there, and then was really fortunate to get connected with some really wonderful folks from that server who brought me into their communities. And now, there are tons of different places where we can play. And naturally, I was just like, I want to be able to like give this game experience that I had that was so wonderful to other people. So I learned how to storytell, and now we're here. So yeah.
Yeah, you were also the first official storyteller um, on the sorry, not official storyteller, first community endorsed storyteller on the unofficial server, the first unofficial official storyteller. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, that was about 6 months ago now. Been playing with you. Yeah, we've been playing with you in the DPI streams and here since about that time, I think.
Yeah, yeah, around then. I was actually really, really fortunate to get brought in. I think by way of gambling, Ed Gamble, who was brought into the TPI sphere by you. So in a way, you are my clock tower grandparent, which is great. We have our little family, but myself and Jan, who some of you may know as well, were both invited by Tyler on Gambling's request to a group of folks that had been playtesting the legacy games that Tyler and Capelli had run for the Sunday stream um, back in the fall. And so through playtesting those games, I was asked if I wanted to join the TPI server, which was very fun. But those play tests were great. I think what Tyler did with the whole Legacy series was just like really, really interesting and really incredible. And it was very fun to be just put in an environment where it was like you're playing Clock Tower, but like also there's more. And I thought that was really cool because I like just how much there is to do with the game, that it's not like, you have the base character and you have all these experimental characters, and then like, you can experiment with other dynamics, stuff like Delirium. Super interesting. Such a cool thing to just take and add to the game and made things like really, really fun, in my opinion.
Yeah, the legacy game was such a good time. I was involved in that, playing that. But yeah, that's how you've come to be here with me on Tuesdays. I'm aware that the bitrate keeps dipping again, so I'm also going to start a backup recording. So that may that may be lost to YouTube. We'll see. So, in any case, uh, that's how you got into playing and storytelling this game. Um, how do you find how did you find yourself in terms of scripts? Like, what's your background with custom scripts, both playing and writing?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I noticed really quickly, and I want to say this in a way that's like truly no shade to anyone who has like tried their hand at script writing, but I think my first couple of experiences with custom scripts were, I think, were with custom scripts, back on the unofficial when I had like first started playing live games, and folks had made scripts, and like no one had looked at the scripts and said like, oh, this is a script that like should be played, or like, oh, here are changes you can make it more balanced. And like I didn't know anything because I was on maybe like my fifth game of Clock Tower, and I was just sitting there being like, oh, new characters, cool. and played a lot of incredibly unbalanced custom scripts. And so as I kind of, tried that out and was like, "Oh, these things maybe don't make sense together." My first reaction wasn't like, "Oh, I want to make a custom script." My first reaction was like, "Oh, there are lots of cool things you can do with these characters, and also if you're not like incredibly intentional about what characters you're putting on a script and like what that's actually going to turn out to be and how those interactions are going to go, like it has the potential to go really badly and like take away from the experience that some people are having." And so my reaction to that was like, I'm not good enough to write a custom script. Like, I need to take my time and like learn more about the game and the characters and the interactions. And I think like it took me a really long time before I was like, oh, I'm gonna write a custom script. And my very first script was actually a, a single demon Leviathan script because I had played a full Leviathan script that a friend of mine had written, and I found it really interesting. And I was like, oh, I really like how it changes the dynamic of the game because so much of a standard game of Clock Tower where you have a demon that's killing in the night is that you have the opportunity to like you're really being like conscious about your votes, and at the end of the game it's like you only have one person or two people maybe who are going to be able to nominate that demon for the good team, and then you have to be conscious of like who we're going to vote on because everyone only has one vote. And one of the things I loved about the potential with a Leviathan in play is like you that is just completely reversed where in a Leviathan game, a full Leviathan game, you're going to have a lot of people alive to make a nomination on the final day and a lot more voting power. But how do you balance that out? And my thought was like you balance it out by making something where like a lot of people have the potential to turn evil, and so you can't necessarily trust everyone, and evil gets a little bit more person power in exchange for the fact that good has a lot more voting and nomination power. um, so I wrote this like full Leviathan script that was an absolute mess. There was, I think, if you set it up badly, you could get like seven evil people, which like you shouldn't do. So, um, yeah, I don't think it was ever run. I just wrote it to be like, what happens if you go on the script tool and like move things around? And then so yeah, so that lives somewhere in the depths of my computer. I don't think it's ever been played. I don't think it should ever be played. Um,
Should do a script note.
but
We should do a
then
script notes on that one.
yeah. Oh god, yeah. That
Actually,
can come at a later time.
we do that. You can hear my thoughts about there being extra evil in Leviathan games because they're very different to non-Leviathan games.
Oh, yeah.
I
I mean,
mean,
it's genuinely it was a cool idea. The actual script that I came up with was, I think, terrible. Like, I don't think it should be run, but we can absolutely talk about how insane it is.
I mean, maybe when we're 200 episodes in, 50, or 50 episodes in, completely run out of things to talk about. Um,
Yeah.
we'll go to some of the horrible ones. My first drafts for the character competitions that I made within about 5 minutes of the character being released, which I always like to do. I don't know if you were around for that, Jamie.
Oh my god. I was around for I think a couple of them. I honestly thought you were gonna say that you were gonna talk about your literally unrunnable teensy.
That's a story for another time.
Yep.
Um,
But yeah, getting back to this particular script, this was the
Absolutely.
second script that I ever wrote after the Leviathan script that shall not be named. I honestly don't think I remember what it's named. But no, this was actually it was the second script I'd ever written. I wrote it for the Puzzle Master script competition because I really liked the concept of the Puzzle Master. I was like, it's really fun to have the piece of information that someone is permanently drunk slash poisoned, and you know that they're out there unless Puzzle Master is a bluff, but you don't know who they are, and you need to figure out that. But like, what if that was murkier because there were a lot of other reasons why somebody could also be drunk or poisoned? Um, and so I wrote this script bottoms up, named because the idea was like everyone is drunk, but good is super powerful. So like hopefully that will make it sort of balanced. Um, and submitted it for the Puzzle Master competition. I think it was literally the last script that was submitted because it was very late, and I was like, do I do it? Do I not do it? Like I don't know. Had sent it to a couple of friends to get feedback and to like make some changes to it, play tested it a couple of times, sent it in, and then won. And I was like, whoa, did not expect that, because it was like I had never really seriously tried to like, write a script and then play test it a bit. Um, it is not balanced. That's the first thing I'll say about it. I think in all of the runs that I have either played or heard about, good has won once, and that was a cult leader win on day one. So while it did
Wow.
win this, yeah, it won the script competition. I do think it is an interesting idea for a script. I genuinely don't actually think it's a balanced script. It like the first couple of times it was run, it was an evil stomp. Like it wasn't just like evil one, it was like all of the people alive on final 3 were evil and the game was just over. Um, and I think part of what's tough about it is that, like, it requires some really, really challenging solves. Maybe and I think there was actually a game, that I story told, of this script back when Patters took over the TPI stream for a Friday, where you were the dreamer, maybe, if I'm remem this was a while ago, so I could be remembering this wrong, and you actually had the solve, but it was, like, at the point where it was, like, a little bit like, y'all had to get the entire good team on board to vote for the solve on, like, final 5, and that's hard in, like, any script.
Yeah,
Um,
it can be. You know what? I'm gonna
yeah.
go look through my notes now and find that game and see if I can remember it.
Yeah, but yeah, so I think, that to me was really telling, was like, with like really, really brilliant players, like they're able to get the solve for good, but there's still that social aspect of actually having to convince everyone else on the team. And in a game when, you might not like have the time, you're putting so much time into the solve that you might not have the time to actually like convince other people that your solve is the right solve, and therefore you need to treat like final 5 as the final day, for example, if you haven't managed to kill any evils, like, that's I think I underestimated, like, the social aspect of that as a very new script writer and didn't consider like, because I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna make, like, a really hard, really interesting puzzle to solve," and then in practice, it's like, yeah, but part of the game is that social piece of not only have you solved the puzzle, but you also have the time and have the tools to convince other people on your team that your solve is the right one in order to help you actually kill the demon. So I do, yeah. I think the script needs to be a little bit more, um, give good a little bit more support, which is a crazy thing to say looking at a script that has a dreamer and a fortune teller and a savant and an artist and a philo. But like genuinely, I think it does.
It's just to take a quick pause and say that um, we appear to be having some connection issues, which is exactly what I wanted to see 3 hours before a 24-hour stream.
Oh.
Exactly what I can do to fix that. Turn the bitrate all the way down. Doesn't seem to have helped. I'll probably turn things off and on again in when we're done here, and hope for the best. But yeah. Oh yeah, the bitrate's just dropped to 0. That's lovely. Anyway, yes. Let's talk about the script a little bit. This script has several previous iterations. Is that right? This is I think, the 7th version.
Yeah, although now that I'm looking back through them, I think at least 2 or 3 of the versions were just me converting it to SAO because I didn't know what SAO was, because like that's how new I was when I wrote this. Um, but yeah, I have a bunch up side by side. I'm trying to figure out literally the first version is just it without the puzzle master on it, because I hadn't even figured out how to use the script tool yet when they put a new character in it. So like this is good. This is just outing like how much of a newbie I was when I wrote this script. Um,
I
but
mean,
yeah, I'm trying to look back to see what those changes were.
there were always it always took a few days to get the new character uploaded right to the script tool.
This is
Um,
true.
so yeah, you can blame Amy for that first change.
Yeah. I mean, no, I can say going back the original iteration of the script, I think the first change that I made was with the minions, because originally it was Poisoner, DA, Marionette, and a Baron. And I ended up swapping the Godfather on because was there a gossip on at that point? No, there wasn't. I ended up adding a gossip for more power for good, and then one of my friends had suggested putting the Godfather on to give evil um, that balance of being able to kill in the night as well, um, so that a gossip couldn't be confirmed. Although, honestly, at this point, I wonder if having a confirmed gossip would be something that balances out more. But yeah, so the first change I made was actually taking off the Baron and swapping in a Godfather. Um, and then I'm trying to remember when I put the Gossip on. I think it took me a while to put the Gossip on. The Gossip didn't come on until like version 5 or so. Um, it's hard to tell which of these were versions that I edited to fix SAO and which of them were versions that I did. Oh, you know what? That was another change. So on the original one I had a sweetheart. Um, And then I ended up taking the sweetheart out pretty quickly because when we play tested it, we realized, oh, the sweetheart and the puzzle master are like basically doing the same thing, except the sweetheart is just after they die, and it seemed not super fruitful to have those together. Um, so we took the sweetheart off and replaced that with a goon. Um, and then there was also okay, no, there was an acrobat for a long time. And the acrobat got swapped out for the mutant. Although I sort of wonder if the acrobat might be a good
Well, we'll talk about that when we're talking about sort of changes, I suppose. Um,
most of the changes that I made were with those with the minions and the outsiders there.
sure. Um, so overall, this script you'd say then has a good lean. Uh, Navian, are you surprised by that? Looking at the script, is that what you would have expected?
You mean an evil lean?
Sorry, yeah, an evil lean.
Yeah, that's probably what I would have expected. There is quite a bit of sources of drunkenness and poisoning, and there are 3 alignment changers, which does lean pretty evil.
Yeah, you got the cult leader, the goon, and the Fangu.
And the Fingu.
Although of course the Fangu, if it's a 0 base outsider game, adding a goon, they can't both change for the same reason, right? That Fangu can't jump then. It's
Oh, they
always
definitely can. There's a DA and a poisoner.
that's true.
There's also
There's
potentially a marionette that might go before a Fengu.
yeah, it can
There's
take
a sailor.
a little coordination or luck.
It
But yeah,
can, but it can definitely happen. It does make it harder for the Fengu to jump if the only outsider in the game is a goon. And that's actually something that you want to consider on a script as well. If you have a Fengu and a goon, are you ever putting them in play together on base 0? And if so, why? Because it is harder for Fengu to jump. And what other things are you putting in play to make it so Fengu might be able to jump? Because otherwise, you're kind of robbing the Fengu of their ability with an outsider, which feels extra rough.
so what strikes you as the strengths of the script?
So there's definitely a good puzzle here. You know, like I said, there's a good amount of drunkenness and poisoning, and I think maybe there's like one too many sources, but there's a couple that are traceable. Well, there's a few that are traceable, really. Right, sailor is traceable, minstrel fairly traceable, goon may or may not be traceable depending on how they play, puzzle master somewhat traceable. And then there's a few sources of evil. So that always helps set up an interesting puzzle. I do think that a gossip on this script is going to more or less be able to hard confirm themselves, which is quite strong. You know, there's a lot of really strong townsfolk on here as well. I think that with the alignment changers and the so many sources of drunken and poisoning, that's why it's an evil lean. And if you pared some of that back just a little bit, you could get quite a bit of balance. Because there's really quite a lot of interesting townsfolk that can do some really cool stuff.
For sure. Are there any particular like interesting things that jump out to you here? The jinxes that the most notable jinx that we've got is the Slayer shooting a leech host. Can incentivize the Slayer to look at people they trust but don't trust the information of, which is always interesting when it's paired with, say, a marionette, right?
Yeah. It's I really enjoy that interaction between the Slayer and the Leech. There are some jinxes that I absolutely hate. I'm looking at you, Leviathan. But this is not one of them. And with these various sources of drunkenness and poisoning, including things that could be permanent, like the Puzzle Master, or potentially a poisoner if they choose to say poison lock a single player to make them look like a leech host. It helps narrow down, like a Slayer can help narrow down worlds of who could be the potential leech hosts. And I actually think that's really cool.
For sure. I feel like a mathematician could have fun on this script, right? Or even a savant.
Oh yeah, mathematician. You might want to consider that, Jams. Mathematician on here would be really interesting.
Yeah, I love that, honestly. I loved Mathematician. If I had to make past Jamie, who, at the time I was writing the script, I would say that the reason there's not a mathematician on it is probably because at the time I like didn't really fully understand how the mathematician worked. That would be my guess. And I freaking love the mathematician. I think the mathematician's amazing and super underrated and
Oh, absolutely.
would yeah, I am honestly very, very supportive of that.
Mathematician flops when you can't get people to coordinate with you, right? If you can't get people to tell you their real roles and their real information, then you sort of really struggle as a math. But when you can, and especially if you're getting numbers, which in this script you almost certainly will, right? Um, it's really can be pivotal to the solve to figure out, okay, what nights how many people got bad information, right? And sort of tracing things back and helping you verify what roles might be in play. Like the philo, for example. If you started off with, say, a 0, and then a philo goes, yeah, well, I used my ability on night 2, and from night 2 onwards you started getting a 1, maybe that can help verify both the philo and the original the player who's claiming that role.
Yeah, for
Like
sure.
there's so many really cool interactions that a mathematician has with their numbers, but they just need the cooperation of their fellow players. And that's kind of the trickier part to get.
I think the mathematician is kind of like the monk in that it's one of those roles that really lights up when you take it off script. Like there's so many fun interactions for it. Like
Yes.
for example, the Slayer shooting the leech. Because the leech's jinx is that if you shoot the leech host, the leech dies. It isn't that if you shoot the leech doesn't die. That happens because of the leech's ability, right? So that would ping the mathematician. The Slayer, the sober and healthy Slayer, shot the demon who didn't die because, well, what's a leech?
Yeah, that's definitely really fascinating.
And then the mathematician will be the only trace of that. But like you say, there's a philosopher on the script, so you can absolutely do that. Yeah. Are there any other fun things on here that leap out at you?
So I don't know if this is fun necessarily. It's probably a matter of opinion on whether it's fun or not, but a tea lady protecting a leech host. That's a thing.
That's always an interesting decision for the leech, right? Because it's like, okay, that's the tea lady. They're next to my host. Like, everyone knows that that's the tea lady, so I kind of have to kill them. But if I do that, my host is vulnerable. I don't want that to be the case, but I'm going to have to kill them eventually because
Right.
otherwise,
But
like, I
also
can't
it's
kill
like,
their
but if
neighbor.
I
We can't get
don't, are people just going to figure out that one of their neighbors is my
right,
host and they're going to kill them for me?
right. But then that comes up with a second layer of why isn't that tea lady dying? Is one of their neighbors one of their neighbors the host? When on the other side of the board, there's just the I don't know the fortune teller getting yeses on everyone, being like, "Hey, Puzzle Master, you want to pick me?"
I also love that if you have a leech sat next to a tea lady, if the leech is executed, then the tea lady would register to the mathematician as having malfunctioned
Would they?
because their evil neighbor should have died, but
Mm.
didn't due
Yeah, but
to someone else's ability, which would be the leech's
I don't think
ability.
the tea lady's ability is malfunctioned there. It doesn't say if you're like it says if your alive neighbors are good, they can't die. It doesn't say if your evil neighbors are. So if your
Ah,
alive
fine.
neighbors are evil, they can die, right?
Yeah, I agree with
Yeah.
Alejo.
But if a DA protected the tea lady's good neighbor, it would work.
DA protect that
Uh,
wouldn't ping the mathematician because the tea lady because they didn't die, even though they didn't die for multiple reasons.
Oh, god
Sorry, sorry, Jamie.
what
This is
you would need there is if you have a tea lady, you need a recluse on the script. So a tea lady sat next to a recluse who is technically a good player, and then they execute the good player on the other side, and you have that player die because the recluse registered as evil.
yes, that good old Navian
Then you
refrain.
could ping
that
the
would
math.
work.
That good
That
old
would work.
that good old Navian refrain of honk needs recluse.
Yeah.
So dangerous. No, I love the recluse, and I remember very intentionally not putting a recluse on this script because I was like, it will become unsolvable, like even more so than it already is.
Needs
I
more
think
recluse spell.
no. Um, oh my god. Yeah, the because I think the thing that is really with that and what could work if we put the mathematician on, which I think would be a great ad, is that recluse can misregister in savant statements, and that just I think
Yeah.
90% of the time when I've seen people go and try and solve, like they do not consider that because it's just so niche,
I do agree
and
that
that can make
recluse
things
and
really, really
savant
hard.
can be a rough
Yeah.
combination. I do think there are things that would benefit from having a recluse as well. Things like fortune teller, a dreamer, so it can misregister to that. But it feels bad with like balloonist or savant. And let's see, a slayer shooting a recluse without a scarlet woman on the probably won't proc, which takes away one of the potentially interesting interactions a recluse could have. But that's fine.
Yeah, I think it depends how I think it also is or feels bad with Courtier because if the Courtier like the Courtier doesn't drink every iteration of a character, right? It just
Right, it
drinks
only drinks
a
one,
character.
and you
So if
could
you
choose. Feels like maybe you just shouldn't be a storyteller, though. Let's be honest.
that would be mean. It would be crazy though, and this I hate that I just thought of this. You could, in theory, have the courtier drink a character, an evil character that's not in play. Like, let's say there's just not a DA, and you have the recluse register as the DA. Would the recluse then be drunk the way that like the cannibal actually like becomes evil or like becomes drunk, like when they gain an ability? Like, because the recluse doesn't gain the ability; they just register.
Yeah, I think
But
it
would
would.
they be drunk?
So, um, this is, to be honest, I think this is actually up for debate. There are some people who interpret the drunkening from the courtier as selecting a player, and therefore it is the player who is drunk. And even if they were to, say, change characters, they would still be drunk. I am of the opinion that that is not the case. The courtier's ability says that you select a character and the character is drunk. In the courtier's almanac, it specifies twice that it is specifically a character, not a player, that the courtier is selecting and drunking. And therefore, I would rule that in order for the recluse to be drunk, they would have to register as that character for the whole time. However, once they're drunk, they can also no longer register as anything other than the recluse, and you end up in a potential loop scenario wherein they just immediately become undrunked, and the drunkening would get removed.
Would that be
So
would that be a loop scenario? Because
like there's precedent for.
if the courtier drunks, let's say the devil's advocate, and the devil's advocate is then
Mhm.
drunk, and the pit hag changes the devil's advocate into a poisoner, and then back into a devil's advocate. I don't think that
And then back
that
into
DA
devil's
is still,
advocate,
by your ruling, I don't think that DA is still drunk. So I would say
That's fair. Yeah,
that the recluse
I
is just
agree that it's not necessarily a loop situation, but it is a situation where you have a minor loop and the loop just ends pretty abruptly there as soon as the recluse can't register anymore. So they're briefly drunk and then they're not, because they can't register as the character who is being drunked anymore. There is a precedent for that sort of understanding of a character being drunked with how the philosopher works, right? This philosopher drunks the character that they have gained the ability of, and even if that character is, say, swapped, right, or comes into play later, then it follows the character around, right? It doesn't necessarily stay on that individual player. It follows the character. I personally rule the courtier the same way because I believe it has the similar wording that the character becomes drunk and therefore follows it around.
Yeah, I think there's an argument either way. But that's a character that's not on the script anyway, the recluse. So
true, yes.
Yeah.
But we're talking about theoretically, if it were, how would courtier interact with that?
We are indeed. But yeah, let's.
I will save my opinion for another time.
I do see what you have sent us,
Jamie.
and it does specify in the courtier is the player of the chosen character becomes drunk, and therefore you could make the argument that it is solidly the player and it won't follow the character around. I just disagree. I think it follows the character around. I think the intention is for the player who currently has that character, just like with the philosopher.
Yeah, I agree with you that it's the player of the chosen. Like it's the character specifically at the time that the pick is made. I think to me, at least the way that I'm reading the top bit where they specify that the courtier chooses a character and not a player, I think is because of just the number of newer players who misunderstand that, bluff courtier specifically, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, I made Alejo drunk." And then if you are an experienced player, you immediately are just like, "Oh, you're evil and bluffing." But now you know, and I'm going to tell you for next time, if you are actually this role, you won't be asked to pick a person, you'll be asked to pick a character.
So
slightly disagree, and the only reason for that is because technically the players do not have to and are not required to read almanac entries in order to play the game. The almanac entries are for the storyteller with regards to the how to run. So there could be some clarification there for the storyteller's benefit, but it's certainly not necessarily for the player's benefit. I do think that reading almanacs is a good choice, and you should consider it as a player. But the almanacs are more for the storyteller as a tool than the players are.
But the storyteller is there for a tool.
Sure.
There as a tool for the players, right? Like, it's the storyteller's job to then feed that info through. It's now saying they have an excellent connection,
to have an
by the way.
understanding in case people.
Which I'm not sure I believe, but let's hope for the best. Should we talk about this script?
I guess that's for.
No, we're theory crafting about what could be on this script. So that we are talking about this.
I mean,
that's part of talking about a script, right? Is look at what's on it, look at what it's missing, look at what other things could be interesting on it for future revisions.
It is part of the process that we go through here, but on the process that you wrote, Avian, it's right towards the bottom of it. But yeah, no. I suppose the recluse. What's the recluse interact with here? Sailor, not really. Balloonist, sad. Dreamer, I don't think the Dreamer is that much of an interaction with the recluse. It just means you can show the Dreamer anything, but the Dreamer already has like built-in misinfo, right? Same goes for the Fortune Teller. It just sort of adds a little bit of extra for the Fortune Teller. Cult Leader is I can see the argument for Recluse being interesting with a cult leader. I'm not sure that I love it myself. Gossip has to be careful. The Savant was spoken about. The Courtier was spoken about at great length. Slayer without a Scarlet Woman or a Tinker. Philosopher doesn't interact with it. Tea Lady is interesting. Farmer is not really interesting, and the Minstrel is the other thing on the script that interacts with the Recluse. Executing a Recluse, and suddenly everyone's been on the piss.
Listen, all I was saying is that there's a couple of roles here that would be interesting with Recluse, and there's some that wouldn't.
Sure. All right. But yeah,
Which is objectively a true statement.
we did mention the courtier a little bit there. There is one thing on the script that I have objected to in the past and will do so again, which is the courtier and the minstrel with the leech. I think that there's only two good characters that prevent executions, which are the sailor and the tea lady. And I think it's very likely that you're going to end up in a situation where a player is confirmed to either be the leech or selected by the devil's advocate on this script. And I think at that point, because there's also not much, if any, nighttime protection. So I think at that point, if you ever go a day of missing a kill, then I think it's quite likely that the leech that either the puka has picked the person who was executed yesterday, right, or the leech has selected the goon, or it was a minstrel day yesterday. So I think in that case, there's not much to be lost by just executing the previous target, and that could be quite a cheap win for the good team on a script like this.
Oh, you're saying if the previous target didn't die?
Right, because there's a lot of ways to get a drunk leech on this script, between the courtier and the minstrel and the goon in particular, which can obviously lead to both the immortal leech problem and the suddenly very mortal leech problem, when it can be fairly clear to town that there is a suddenly mortal leech problem. Like, because you've seen games where where everyone is just like, okay, that person is the leech. Now we need to find the leech host, right? And I can't see too many reasons why that wouldn't happen on this script. But this script also comes with the added note of, okay, well then let's just drunk them and kill them. Unless I'm missing something.
Yeah.
Well, I think it depends when you figure that out in the game, and I think the argument for balance there would be that at that point, if the courtier has held their ability, that evil has had time to kill them. Because if you execute somebody on the first day and they're next to a tea lady, or if that information isn't, readily public, obviously that depends, right? Like if the tea lady has chosen to play in a way where they're going around claiming tea lady really hard to everyone, and so everyone is like, oh well, that person is clearly the tea lady. You also don't know necessarily if it's a DA that has been the reason. And like, yeah, if it's a DA, then you could kill the person again. But like, the DA also doesn't have to protect somebody evil. Like, let's say the DA protected the savant for no reason because they thought that would be fun, and then like any evil or any minion happens to get executed, it's a minstrel day. If you're like, oh, we just killed the person who didn't die the previous day, like then you're killing the savant, and that's bad. I think there's more like, yes, absolutely. There are games where somebody is an outed leech. I think a good example, and this was, almost this exact situation. Back on the Sunday stream when Tyler and Capelli were running, we played Blind Man's Bluff, which was the script that Navian and I and Andrew helped Tyler put together, which is a script that's designed specifically to be played blind, where you're not sent your role and you have to figure out what your role is based on what you're told in the night and what sort of actions are happening. In that game, I was the leech. I figured out I was the leech, like, it took a couple days. And it got to the point where I had been executed, didn't die. I was bluffing like huntsman or something. And I was so sure that there was a courtier, and I was just like, oh, this is going to be so bad. Like, I am just going to be executed and die because there's a courtier. And it turned out there wasn't a courtier, and it was actually Besbo who was my witch. But for like a very long time, I was like so just deflated because I was just like, there's no way that I'm going to like make it through. I'm just an outed leech who's going to be drunk. It felt really bad as a player to be in that situation. So I definitely understand that.
Right.
Um, I
Uh,
think, yeah, part of that it's a tough situation. I think it goes both ways that like if you end up in that particular situation, but it also is quite a rare situation to end up in because I think in most setups, you'll either be able as the evil player to identify where that courtier is and deal with them earlier. The courtier like may not have held it and might just send it early on an ability. And if you know that there's somebody who can make you drunk as the leech early, then you just have to not get executed for a couple days, which is true for every demon. So yeah, I think it's less of a problem. And also again on a script that is super evil. It's something that does work real strongly in Good's favor.
yeah, I mean, I have been on the receiving end of a game like that, which was the Legacy Game 8. Although to be fair, that was in part because the Pit Hag decided to create a good Scarlet Woman. That was kind of the point of the script. I think it was the game was, hey, you can make
Multiple
as
Scarlet
many
Women could
Scarlet
be in
Women as
play.
you like
Mhm.
functionally. Yeah, and the Pit Hag decided, hey, let's just make a good Scarlet Woman and see what happens. And the leech,
Funnily
they just
enough, that was
executed
the
them.
second time that person had been a good Scarlet Woman.
Yes, so I'd heard.
I remember that game.
But yeah, then it was just like, okay, let's just execute the good Scarlet Woman and the outed leech and just win. And then Tyler and Capelli just made up some nonsense to fill out the last half an hour of the stream. I mean, that was fun. But yeah, it's just a risky interaction, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Particularly,
It is, but I'm not sure it's necessarily any riskier than any other demon on a minstrel night. The risk is of getting exposed ahead of time, but that's
right?
always sort of a risk for the leech, right? Like the sooner a leech gets exposed as the leech, the harder it's going to be a game for them to possibly win.
Yeah,
One of the leech's like strongest weapons is to hide that there is a leech in the game, and B, that they specifically are the leech.
yeah. It becomes easier. Um, it becomes harder to win as a leech if you're exposed, but this can lead to a situation where it's just over. Um,
That's
but
true, yes.
but yeah, um, I get what you're saying. All right, the next character to talk about, I think. Um, well, actually, on the subject of the minstrel,
Actually,
yeah,
I was going to say on the subject of the leech,
yeah,
somebody in chat has pointed this out as well. Golem leech is a little scary, and I agree with that. I think, there are a lot of sources of drunken and poisoning that can help disguise who the leech host is, but a golem can help eliminate one of those candidates. And by eliminate, I also mean it can just kill the leech host, which doesn't necessarily feel very good.
it's interesting that you should say that because what I was going to say was, all right, now that we're done with the leech, let's talk about the next character, which is a little bit controversial, which is the golem. So let's talk about the golem and the leech. Um, yeah, that can be a huge issue, right? To the point where a lot of people use a homebrew jinx for it. Is that the sort of thing that you're envisioning, Jamie?
Yeah, I think that's super reasonable. I think at the time that I wrote this, Gollum had come out pretty recently before the Puzzle Master. Um, and I don't know if people had even started using that jinx yet, but I do really like that as a jinx. Not to mention if that leech host is sat next to any like tea lady or if they're DA protected, then I think because wait, let me look
Well,
up how the
yeah,
golem works to
DA
make sure I'm getting this right.
protection wouldn't
Yeah,
work because they just die,
yeah.
but a tea
Do they?
lady protecting them would.
Yeah.
But that's a very
But
niche
yeah,
scenario, right? You'd have to
I
have the
do
host
like
being specifically next to the tea lady, and the tea lady being willing to be like, oh, yeah, they didn't die because I'm the tea lady. And they're, both my neighbors are just good.
yeah, I do really like that jinx though, that if they're the leech host, that like that, is covered under the golems if the nominee is not the demon.
Yeah, I mean, it's like,
Like they
I
are the host,
don't know
therefore.
how I feel about that because I think they, you know, town most of the time when a golem doesn't work, they kill, I believe it's been a Fengu jump, or they kill the player that the golem nominated if the golem is trusted. So even with the jinx, it still creates a scenario where the game just kind of ends most of the time.
I mean, that's just the golem. Like, that's true of any demon with the golem.
I suppose that's
Yeah,
fair, but
I also think the timing of it can be interesting where
I also
you
just really don't like Golem all that much, I'll be honest. Some of this is my bias against Golem, and some of that's probably coming from the Golem release where I was the demon and the Golem was used to kill one of my minions. My other minion was executed on that same day, and also I had a confirmed virgin in play, so I had like no breathing room.
Yeah, that sounds not fun.
It
I was
wasn't.
actually one of the first times that we play tested this particular script, I was the golem, and it ended up being really it's one of those where, like, golem can be both an out it was a great example, honestly, of how the golem is super powerful and also, like, fully an outsider because I, like, body slammed the DA, and it was amazing, and it was at a point where a lot of people thought the DA was good, and I was like, "No, this person is evil, like, I'm killing them," and it made a huge difference because they no longer had a DA thanks to that. Also, evil then just left me alive, and then I was the one good player left, and I couldn't nominate, so we lost, but I was like, "Yeah, that is an outsider for you," and I think it was, in that particular situation, good, but I do think in terms of Golem and Leech Host in particular, if the Golem does kill the leech host early, they're able to, you know, like it's about as likely as a slayer correctly shooting the demon on day 1 or 2, where like
Mhm.
later in the game, I think you know, that's evil still has ways to deal with it. If there's a poisoner, that poisoner can poison the golem, which is a weird one because then like the golem wouldn't necessarily know if they had been poisoned. I do think that Puzzle Master is like a rough one with Gollum. I wouldn't puzzle drunk a Gollum because that just feels really shitty. Like
Oh, I
turns out
would.
all game you've been able to nominate, but you don't know that. um,
I would absolutely puzzle drunk a Golem.
Maybe I would once. I shouldn't say I never would, but I do. I think it's a tough one. I feel similarly to Butler, but I also think with both of those, it is really tricky because I think especially with Fangu Butler or Fangu Golem, you really need players who are going to be mindful and respectful of like someone who is claiming those things. I story told a game of this once, or actually, it might have just been some other custom. I don't think it was this. Now that I think about it, um, the golem got Fengu jumped to, and then people were like, "Nominate, prove that you're the golem." Like, and it was like, well, they couldn't because if they nominated, that person wouldn't have died. Like, and they were just like, "No, I really don't want to." And it
Oh,
was
you mean kind of similar to the game where Alejo Fengu jumped to me, the golem, before I had nominated, because they did it on night 2, and then I got about 10 people just yelling at me at once to use the ability, and it wasn't very fun. Yeah.
yeah, Gollum is one of those where the players I think need to be really really mindful of like what it means that that type of character is on the script because like you're not going to get confirmed by the storyteller by them, you know, admonishing you for not for like using your ability in a way that you shouldn't or anything, but you're also like it's really tough to have characters that are very difficult for evil to bluff because they're confirmable. But particularly I think with Fangu. So yeah, Fangu Golem can be tough if the players aren't willing to like not pressure a player who is claiming Gollum to nominate or not.
That is definitely a social issue that I think storytellers need to be aware of. And quite frankly, more storytellers need to be willing to step in when it feels like there is pressure being put on people. You know, I understand that most of us who play are adults, but, you know, when you have multiple people kind of all talking loudly at you at once, it can be very overwhelming for some people. And some people's response to that is to sort of like shut down and cave in. Not everybody is necessarily as good as everybody else at standing up for themselves and saying, like, no, I don't want to use my ability that way. Some people just kind of start to crumble. And it would be great if storytellers could be a little more capable and willing of seeing when social pressure is being applied in a really like high pressure way that doesn't feel good, and maybe be willing to kind of tell everybody like, hey, let's take a second, take a step back and chill out and remember that everybody has their own agency, and that yelling at people and telling them what to do is not the greatest way to play this game.
Sure. Yeah. Is there anything else on this script to talk about? So, all of the demons have some level of protection apart from the Puka. The Imp and the Fangu can both move, and the Leech obviously can't die. So that is like an escape hatch for the evil team in most of those cases, right? How have you found that the Puka plays on this script, given that's the only one without that? Because there's also no Scarlet Woman, no Mastermind.
Yeah. Honestly, I found that it's quite good because it's obviously if the imp star passes, they're able to move their suspicion on them and they escape the day. Whereas the Puka, if you escape the day, next morning you're still there and you're still the Puka. But yeah, I've honestly found that the Puka has a lot of cover because I think so much of what makes a Puka game tough is like tough for the Puka, I should say, is when you realize that it's a Puka game. And I think that because of the amount of drunkenness and poison on the script, it makes it really, really hard to identify that it's a Puka game, which is something that works in the Puka's favor. So yeah, I think they have a lot of cover to sort of claim information. And again, because there's so much drunkenness and poison, you can get away with having a bluff that like doesn't quite work. And I think that's something that on other scripts I've noticed has been really challenging for evil, where like a good example actually would be last night's Sunday game where like Ekin was the leech bluffing Savant. And as the game went on, it turned out like, yeah, a couple of his Savant statements just didn't make sense. And there was no real reason for him to have gotten like shitty Savant info. So it was like, well, he's good execution because like he is almost certainly evil. And then
Right.
yeah. So then it was the sort of thing where it was like, okay, well, you're just outed as evil because your bluff doesn't add up. Whereas on this script, I think you can't actually rely on that because if your bluff doesn't add up, it's like, oh, well, I was hit by a poisoner, or I am the puzzle drunk, or I picked a goon in case I'm bluffing something that picks people, or a sailor drunked me. Like there are so many, or it was a minstrel night. Like there are so many different ways to kind of get away with having a bluff that's slightly off. And in a Puka game in particular, if you're thinking that someone was puzzle drunk, but then they die the next day, you can just be like, oh, well, maybe I'm the puzzle drunk because they had weird information and then they died, so they were just Puka poisoned. So I think there's a lot more cover than you have in the normal Puka game. So I think I have seen the Puka work pretty well on this script. And again, because you have the tea lady and the sailor, there's a bit of cover for like the situation where the person the Puka picked is then executed during the day.
I love the Imp on the script. You know why I love the Imp on the script?
Because Imp is a great demon.
Imp
Because
is
I
a
was
great
going to say,
demon,
because Imp is the best demon
but on this,
and should be on more scripts and
but
isn't, and
but
it's
on this
insane.
script in particular,
Yes.
Why?
I love nothing more than giving a random townsfolk a heart attack when the Imp star passes to the marionette.
Hell yeah. I absolutely love Imp Marionette for that. Somebody comes up to you and goes like, you're the marionette. And they're like, I don't know. Or even better, you just don't even tell them at all. And then you just wake somebody up and are like, congratulations, you've gotten a promotion. You're now the Imp. I'm sorry, what?
I can guarantee that's not an interaction that I thought about when I wrote this script because I was just not there yet. But now that you have brought it up, hell yeah, that was really smart. And I totally intended it. Wink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. What else is there to talk about here? Um, Nathan, have you got anything else? And any other interactions on here that are of note? Because I think I'm pretty much done with that.
Poka Farmer is an interesting one.
Oh yeah, it is. That is an interesting interaction.
Yeah, if evil can figure out where the farmer is and they have a Puka, that farmer's not jumping, but they can take up the bluff. I mean,
Yeah, I
that's
like
true also with if you're any other demon type and you have a poisoner. But yeah,
I really like the balance of those two because if you are the farmer, you don't tell anyone you die in the night, and then no one else is claiming to be a farmer and continues to do that. Like it goes both ways because I think the information you get in that case as the farmer without a drunk on the script is like you're either puzzle drunk, but if no one is claiming puzzle master, you are explicitly in a puka game and figuring
or
out
you were
what
poison killed.
yeah, or you were poison killed. Um, so yeah, they're like you're getting information about the composition of the evil team if you don't like proc when
Yes.
you die. So it's
Yeah.
still and that's really I think what I ultimately was the goal behind this script was like you're getting information based on whether or not your ability is functioning properly and I liked the way that that was kind of playing off of in BMR rather than just taking your information at face value you're getting information off of executions off of who lives and dies off of the number of deaths and this script is all about like you're getting information based off of the drunkenness and poison.
Sure. You said the mutant actually is a recent addition. It's a naked mutant. There's no Serenovus on the script. So, do you feel like that could be a concern? Because there's this, like, it's often.
Your audio cut off, Alejo.
Oh, okay. Um, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mutant, no Serenovus. Thoughts?
There's so much drunken poison on this script that half the time, if a mutant tries to confirm themselves, they might literally not be able to because they're drunk or poisoned in some way.
That's always fun.
But I also think that like
I'm the mutant. God damn it, execute me. No can do. Sorry.
yeah, and they literally can't talk. I mean, that was like when we played Revenge of the Martian Vampires, and Simon was the mutant who Aggie managed to just like blindly confirm as the goblin bluffing librarian. And like at multiple times in that game, Simon tried to come out and be like, "I'm the mutant, like fine, you got me." Um, and like literally couldn't be executed for it because Nadine had made him innkeeper drunk like many nights, basically like as long as she was alive, she'd been picking him and someone else, and like Ed just kept making him drunk. Um, but yeah, I think I really actually like the interplay of drunk mutant. Because it can be a really interesting one, and especially if it's a Fangu game, you keep coming out as the mutant and like don't, you know.
And then that hypothetical mathematician is just getting arbitrary pings.
That's true. It would definitely mess with a mathematician. Like if you would have executed the mutant as the storyteller, but didn't
But you can't.
because they were drunked, yeah.
I mean, that's the
That's
mutant being an outsider.
yeah, I
Like,
think that
it's
fucks
not
with the
as
mathematician in a way that's, like, less
I don't
fun
know.
because it's just so unsolvable. I feel like if I were storytelling that game, I would only ever register it to the mathematician if the mutant had, like, very obviously and explicitly broken
Yeah,
madness
absolutely, and that's
rather than, like, something that was kind of borderline.
absolutely, and that's the mutant's choice, though, right? Because it's not like it's a tinker where it can just be like, "Oh, hey, I meant to kill the tinker today." Yes, the mathematician gets a random one. It's like the mutant has to do something
Exactly.
to trigger that, right?
Yeah. So in that sense, it would still be, like, followable and solvable from the good team's end.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. I hear a lot people talk about the mutant as if it like has to like if you're going to put madness on the script, you have to put all of it. You have to have a pixie, you have to have a Cerenovus, you have to have like them all together. I kind of like having the mutant alone every once in a while. And again, on a script that like currently is very evil sided, if it would help the good team, I would consider confirming the mutant by executing them. Um, 'Cause it's also, it's confirmation that comes at the price. It's like the virgin, confirmation that comes at the price of someone then who is good being dead. Um, but yeah, I don't necessarily think this script needs a Pixie or a Cerenovus for the mutant to be like an interesting interaction with the other characters.
Yeah, my next thought pertains to the philosopher. You pulled the philosopher in this game. What's your first thought? Like, are you going to wait a few days, or is there something that you just like want that going for that? And for bonus points, Nadian, don't say goon.
Okay, fine, farmer.
Farmer. Are you just going to go straight for the farmer?
I
It
mean,
feels like
me,
this.
yeah.
Fair enough. But it feels like there's quite a few different options on this script, which is always good to see, right? Like, it's not this.
I would probably go farmer or fortune teller. If I am feeling spicy, yes, goon. I have been a philo goons before. Don't at me. Or cult leader.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like there's a bunch of different options on this script, whereas there are some scripts where it's just like, oh, well, I guess I'm a poppy grower or an alchemist then, without pulling the token, right? Like,
Right.
I think the balloonist is quite a strong option because you don't add that outsider.
Yeah, you get the benefit of getting names without adding an outsider in.
Right. And if it's a 0 base outsider game, then you can confirm whether or not that there's a Godfather in play, or a Fangu in play, or a real balloonist in play, right?
I definitely think
get...
there's some people who would actually consider going golem.
I was actually about to say that. I think that a really interesting thing that you could do is hold on to the power for a few days and just be like, I nominate this person. Next day, I nominate this person. Next day, I nominate this person. That person dies.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, because there's only one way that can happen, right, on the script.
Yeah. It's also kind of funny.
Yeah, it is. Like, what the fuck? Oh, you're the philosopher. That's nice.
Oh, if you have a confirmed golem and then you go philo golem, that you know for certain that golem is drunk and therefore they can actually nominate. I know it's kind of pushing it because the reason that is that you're meant not to know, but this is a philo who has hard confirmed that they were previously not this ability and now they are.
What if you get poisoned?
I think it's something that would only work who the philo. I think the specific situation.
Yeah, the philo.
That's a fair point, Alejo.
If there's a philo golem who proves themselves to have the golem ability at that time / after that time, the person claiming to be the original golem should feel comfortable nominating because mechanically it is proven.
But it's not. Like, it's not because that philo could be picked by the poisoner or picked by the puka.
No, I'm saying like literally on that day.
But yes, on that day,
and on that day,
they are guaranteed
that
they
only.
are drunk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then on like the following day, if like let's say they are poisoned, then the golem could try. And then you get the information of like either their ability worked and that was their one nomination for the game, or it didn't work and that person's the demon, or it didn't work because they're drunk. Like it does definitely become tricky because
clear that with your storyteller. Some may consider that to be cheating.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Gambling has asked an interesting question on the poisoner minstrel. If a poisoner poisons the minstrel and is then executed, what happens? Does the minstrel proc because the poisoner's ability has been removed immediately, and therefore the minstrel is sober, healthy when they see the poisoner being executed, or were they poisoned at the point of the execution and therefore they don't see it?
Well, you're a rules expert. You tell us.
I've had this conversation so many times.
I have also had this conversation a few different times, and I think I've probably flip-flopped on which answer is correct, which means that I think that a storyteller could rule it either way. I would be fine with a storyteller ruling it either way as long as they are consistent and answer the question when it's asked with how they personally would rule it.
Sure.
But yes, as Jams has said in chat, the BOTC is bad at simultaneous occurrences is what happens.
It is.
Yeah.
My ruling, for what it's worth, would be that the execution is during the day, and so the minstrel's ability would not be able to occur, I would rule the poisoner trumps in that occasion.
I think I would also rule that the poisoner trumps in that occasion, and that the minstrel would not proc.
Yeah, I think the tough part is like, what if the poisoner is the one that's executed?
I don't
Well,
think it
yeah,
matters.
that's what gambling
That's
is
the
asking
question.
specifically.
Yeah.
If the poisoner is the one who is executed, is their poison? Does their poison get removed in time for the minstrel to register that execution and then proc, or does it not? And I would say it does not. They are poisoned at the point of the actual execution itself, and I would honor that poison.
I think the answer to your question, gambling, is shrug. But that's how I would be most likely to rule it. It's a tricky one, but yeah.
Yeah, I do think it comes down to that the larger conversation of like, should there be good characters in the game that evil can literally do nothing to affect? Um, and if you rule it such that the poisoner, when they're executed, like can't poison the minstrel if they have previously poisoned the minstrel, like that feels a bit harsh to evil, I think, just because then it's like, oh, you can literally do nothing to turn off the minstrel.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Is there anything else of discussion on this script? I personally think that the balloon, particularly if you were to add the recluse, but even without the balloonist and the poisoner, I don't love as a combination because it only takes a small part of the poisoner's ability to completely ruin the balloonist's entire ability, right?
Not just the poisoner on this script. There's a lot on here that can mess up that balloonist.
Yeah, the
For
minstrel
even just
is
a single night.
another one, but I think the poisoner is the one that's worse for it. Like the puka kills them, the puzzle master and the leech are both permanent game things. They're using basically their entire ability to do it. The philosopher is going to get the benefit of the ability. I think it's really just the poisoner and the minstrel, and the minstrel comes with such a strong upside that it arguably worth it because that is basically the minstrel's entire ability as well, right? Particularly in a 1 million game.
It is, but it does feel bad. Like minstrel feels bad with certain things, right? It feels bad with like Undertaker, for example.
I suppose the
And I
sailor.
think it does feel bad with balloonist.
Yeah.
Minstrel feels bad with bounty hunter as well.
I think the
Yeah.
counter argument would be that if you have a minstrel who procs once, a balloonist that gets 3 pieces of silver information is still getting useful information if all of those people are claiming to be townsfolk. And a balloonist who has to go through more than 1 minstrel day is still in a pretty damn good position because that means that 2 minions have been killed.
Sure, but it messes up their own information so bad that you know.
I think the real strength of the balloonist info is 2 of these 4 players are evil, and one of them is the demon, and that's powerful information to the point of it adding an outsider, like removing an entire extra townsfolk's ability. And just a single knight's misinformation corrupts that to the point of uselessness. So what you basically then got is like the balloonist's ability is famously for a script designer +1 outsider, also something about some names.
Yeah. I mean, arguably the stronger part of the balloonist ability is being able to verify the outsider count as a result of sort of that of, +1 outsider, also here's some names.
Yeah, I mean, outsider count is obviously always a hugely important thing to be able to figure out. Balloonist is also an incredible bluff for a Fangu, or a
Yeah, of
Godfather,
course.
or even a Baron on the right script. But on this script, I think the Fangu is going to love being told that balloonist.
Yeah. I also think that the balloonist isn't necessary on this script for the outsider count, right? Because you do already have a Fangu and a Godfather. So you have a balloonist whose outsider count outsider manipulation isn't needed, and there's a lot of ways for their information to be corrupted to the point where their entire ability might to them feel a bit useless. So I would probably consider replacing balloonist.
Okay. Anything else, Nadine, Amy, do you want to talk about on the script? Or we'll move on to the next section.
Yeah, I think we've covered more or less most of the things that I see that are of note.
All right, then we'll move on to the next section. And Jamie, if you have any particular thoughts on this one, I'll give it to you to lead. You sit down. Your storyteller has said, "Okay, today we're going to be playing bottoms up," and you pull a townsfolk roll or an outsider roll or something like that. You pull a good character. What character are you hoping that you're pulling? And like you've just seen that little hint of blue. What character are you hoping that you're pulling? And what sort of interesting things are you going to look to do with other characters, with other people? Like, just what are your first thoughts on pulling like a blue token?
Oh man, I don't know. And this script has a lot of things that I think I would be happy to be. This is funny because recently I was doing a thing where we were filling out some of those tier lists where it's like, what are the characters that you're most excited to be? Or I think it was just a tier list of like Clock Tower characters, but the way that I filled it out was I was like, okay, like the scale. Oh man, one of my friends, Chiz worded it really well. And I'm trying to see if I can find how he had um worded it. It was, yeah, the top tier was, "I am grinning when I draw this token." The next tier was, "I am moderately chuffed when I draw this." The next one was, "I'm not sad, but this is gonna require a bit of effort to be a really fun game." The next one was, "Sigh, okay, let's do this." And then the last one was, "I would prefer that we play a different script." Um, so it was fun to sort of see to consider characters in that light of less like, which one is sort of objectively a good character versus which one would I just be, like, really excited to pull out of the bag. I think on this particular script, um, like we talked earlier about Philo and how much power there is in the Philo when you have like a lot of really interesting options. Um, but personally, I almost wonder if getting Philo on the script, I would be like a
Oh, I
little bit
see.
overwhelmed
Sure.
by choice. I think I agree with what Navian said earlier too about like Philo Farmer is super awesome and super strong. Also, the
Sorry about
last
that.
time that I played S&V in person, I went Philo Sage, and long story short, there was a snake charming and everyone became a demon, and I just sat there being the Philo Sage, being like, "This is the greatest mistake of my life." um, but no, I think on this particular script, normally I'd say gossip, but knowing how much drunkenness and poison, I feel like being the gossip might get a little bit frustrating because you would be like, wait, am I drunk or poison? You could also, I feel like, do some things to kind of meta it. Like, let's say it's, looking like you might be a puzzle drunk gossip. You could just gossip something that's like obviously true and evil can't replicate a kill. And if that doesn't go through and you get guessed as like a puzzle master drunk, that feels a bit cheap. Um, so genuine, yeah, I think on this particular script, I would want Savant, Cult Leader, Dreamer. I think in that order.
I would be happy to be dreamer, fortune teller, cult leader, farmer. That's fully a personal opinion on farmer. There are some people who absolutely can't stand the characters that need to die in the night in order to get stuff, but I love them.
I'm just too sus to get killed usually, which is great when I like need information and terrible when I'm just like trying to die.
That can happen to me sometimes too, but I still love them and I still try real hard to die in the night.
I think Dreamer is it's the real standout role for the good team here. Yeah, they're going to get poisoned a whole bunch, but I think they're going to get, particularly the first night, they're probably going to get some good info. And I think that's going to be quite hard for the evil team to bluff. So I think if you pull the Dreamer, you're going to be quite well confirmed by at least one or two players.
I
Obviously,
agree. Dreamer's going to be a little harder to bluff because if you have wrong info on S&D, its home script, then you can be bluffing that you might be sat near a Nodashi, or you can be bluffing that it's a Vortox game, right?
right.
On here, you can still bluff similar things. You can try to bluff like maybe I'm Puzzle Master drunk, maybe I picked the goon, maybe I was poisoned. You wait a day. If I don't die, I wasn't poker poisoned, but maybe I'm a leech host. Like there's still options for evil players to be giving wrong information and still have viable worlds where they're good, but most of the time on this script, I think they're probably going to just end up getting executed for having wrong info.
Right. Here's an interesting question. Slayer. The Slayer's jinx with the leech. If the leech is poisoned, Nathan, I think you treat the jinx. Sorry, not the jinx. The leech host as being like a global thing, right? So at that point, the wording of the leech Slayer's jinx would imply that the Slayer then has two valid slaying targets, right? But only one of them will kill the demon,
Yes.
which I think is
Yes.
always an interesting because the jinx is that player dies, not that both players die, because that's part of the leech's ability.
Right. The leech dies as a consequence of the fact that their host has died. But if the leech can't die because they're drunk or poisoned, then
So if a Slayer shoots and the game doesn't end, you know exactly what's just happened, and it's interesting. Right. It then gives the storyteller a headache, but that's interesting. But I think that the Slayer could link up quite well with a couple of characters. Obviously, the Fortune Teller is an old classic from Trouble Brewing that pairs really well with the Slayer. I think that the obviously the Tea Lady is going to give the Slayer some useful information. The what else is going to give the Slayer useful information? The Dreamer. Dreamer people who the Dreamer sees as demons become good Slayer targets, unless obviously they're the Leech. I think there's a bunch of interesting things that the Slayer can interesting options for the Slayer to hook up with. So I think for me it will be Dreamer Slayer as being the most interesting characters to pull here and things that you can do with them.
yeah, I think that Slayer can definitely combo with, in particular, like you said, Dreamer and Fortune Teller. If you have reason to believe that the balloonist's info has been sober healthy the whole game, you can help eliminate balloonist pings that way as well.
Sure. And obviously, you both know me. You know that I'm delighted the moment I pull that mutant token.
Just how I feel when I pull Goon.
So let's talk
And then I bluff Tea Lady and get the minions killed.
I mean, when I pull Goon, I also get the minions killed because they refuse to pick me despite me claiming to be the Goon on the start of the first day.
Well, maybe you shouldn't vote on them.
Yeah, well, maybe they should stop claiming things which act before the minions act.
You wanted me to outwitch you publicly?
A little bit, yeah.
Well, I'm definitely getting killed then.
Anyway, yeah, you pull an evil token. What do you want to pull? What do you want to do? What interesting combinations can you make work here?
Well, obviously, I'm pulling Poisoner because if Poisoner is on the script and I'm evil, I'm like 90% guaranteed going to be the Poisoner, which is fine because I love it.
Sure.
Leech can be very swingy, and there's certainly roles on here that it could be swingy with. That it would be pretty obvious when somebody is a Leech host, but I still just really enjoy Leech, so I would have fun with that. I mean, to be honest, I think I would enjoy being all of these demons. I like all of these demons for different reasons. You know, Fangu, Imp both have sort of like escape patches. Puka and Leech both deal with poisoning, and I like poison.
Sure. I think the marionette is a good counterpoint to what you were saying earlier, Jamie, about how the gossip could just gossip. I am the gossip, and if that doesn't get a kill, hey, Puzzle Master, pick me. Because then what that could be doing is saying, hey, Puzzle Master, pick me. Oh, I'm not the Puzzle Master. There is no Puzzle Master. Oh, neighbors, you might want to panic.
Yeah.
So yeah, you pull an evil token, Jamie. What do you want, and what do you want to do with it?
Oh God. I think y'all both know how I feel about being evil. Which is like I will do it. I will even enjoy it. But I always prefer being good. But if I do, I think I really I know we talked a little bit before about the imp, but like I have such a freaking crush on the imp. I think the imp is great. If I had to be any demon on this script, I would for sure be the imp. I think I've come around to the leech as well. At the time when I put the leech on this script, I was like very not about the leech. I was like, leech sucks. You like pick a host, but like if you're outed as the leech, final three is a guaranteed 50-50. That's lame. Like, but I think that was also because I had like literally just played a game where it was my first game on the TPI stream and I was the leech. And it was a super fun game, but I was like very outed and just like couldn't do anything to stop it, and there was no real way to, like, frame a second person at that point. But that was also, like, very recently to when the Leech had come out, and I think I've, come around to the Leech. I think it's really interesting, but I struggle a bit with the RNG of the first night pick with the Leech, and same with Puka. Um, I have, like, a really, really impressive streak or habit of picking someone who like should not be able to die immediately as the
And just
puka. Like
outing
I
what's going on.
every single time I'm the puka, I pick a fool. I pick a goon. Like what I it's like I have the worst luck with the puka. I pick my own minion. So like in a teensy, like it's puka and I actually don't hate the puka. I just like have really bad luck with the puka. Um Similarly, like Fangu, I kinda like, but I had, like, a pretty rough experience with a Fangu recently where, like, one of the minions got or one of the outsiders got, like, turned into a farmer, and it was just like, well, that was the one that I was gonna, like, be able to like, it
Jump
yeah.
to.
So and again, when we go back to the Fangu and talk about I think that's something important when you're storytelling with a Fangu and a farmer, like if the Fangu hasn't jumped yet, maybe don't turn one of the outsiders into the farmer
Yeah,
because that's
that
not
may
fair
not
to the
be the most
Fangu and
balanced
that's their whole
choice.
ability. Yeah. Um, but yeah, I so like for demons, I would be feeling decent if I pulled an imp token on the scale of like how I feel when I pull evil tokens, which is uncomparable to how I feel when I pull a good token. But yeah, and then for minions, for sure. I think being poisoner is encompasses a lot of the things that I find fun about being good that are like often removed when you're evil because I think poisoner is all about like solving and figuring out whose roles are what and then in order for your poison to be like effective. Because if you're a poisoner and you just like pick someone every night because you're like, oh, I think this person's a good poison, and then they're like I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good like poison target that's not really ineffective. Like if they're the cult leader, like that's not going to help your team at all.
I
Although it
leech
might
hosted a
confuse
cult
them
leader
because
once.
yeah.
That was a
Um
fun game though.
yeah,
We
that's
spoke
Yeah, it
exactly
was
we spoke about that last week. If you missed that, go back and check it.
2 weeks ago.
Sorry, yeah, it's last episode,
yeah,
2 weeks ago. If you missed that, go back and check it. It's on YouTube. This will be if I
yeah.
can manage to piece it together without it spontaneously combusting. Yeah. Um, this is certainly it's certainly a script which has a few interesting combinations for the evil team as well. The DA combines with the leech quite in a way which a lot of people don't like. And actually, I wanted to talk about this earlier. I do not have a problem with leech devil's advocate. I know that a lot of people like, oh well, you can
I
just
don't
get
either.
a lot of people like you can just get to final three and then just protect the host, and that's game. But that's true of any demon
But
with the
that's
devil's
true,
advocate.
yeah.
You can get to final
If the
three with
demon's protected.
yeah, you
Mhm.
can get to final three with imp, DA, farmer, and then yeah, well, you've already lost. Like it doesn't matter whether the farmer or the imp is the one that you have to. Well, the farmer or the demon is the one that you have to kill. As long as the DA's got their rhythm right, that's game.
Yep, I agree.
The only place it's a little bit like the DA in that sense can be a bit broken is the low monster, and I think there's things in the works to make that less of a problem. But right now that can be a problem, but I don't think that that's a problem with Leech. How do you feel about that one, Jane? Because I can see that Nadian, you
Yeah,
agree with
I
me.
am no. I feel like we've talked about this on the World Cup podcast as well, where like my problem isn't with DA and Leech, my problem's with Pacifist and Leech because I think Pacifist is already so difficult to storytell in a way that it doesn't feel like an outsider. And when you have it on a script with a Leech, it's like, okay, well, they're not going to protect the leech host because that would be unfair to the good team, unless it's a very specific situation where they're like an evil pacifist, or like they're like very very few situations where that would be good. They're not going to protect anyone who's already protected by a tea lady, and the tea lady's going to get more information if the neighbors die. So if you're executing into a tea lady neighbor, like pacifist, I don't need to rant about the pacifist, but yeah, I think
Actually, no, that
the to me, DA and leech is fine. Pacifist and leech, or pacifist DA leech, is where it's really really rough for the player who's the pacifist.
this actually raises an interesting question that I want to ask you, Navian. It's not about the script at all, but doesn't have to be, right? Pacifist, pacifist leech, saving the leech host with a good pacifist. Like it feels really unfair to the good team, right? But the role of the
Mhm.
storyteller is to keep a balanced game and not worry about who deserves what, right? Like you yourself have spoken uh, quite vocally about the idea of people deserving things in this game. That's not the storyteller's place to judge that. But
Yep, that is correct.
if the storyteller chooses not to use the pacifist's ability to save the leech host, the game just ends. Is Would you not argue
Yeah.
then that the pacifist not saving the leech host is the storyteller deciding that the good team have deserved to win that game on that day?
No, I think it's the storyteller deciding that a townsfolk ability should be used as a townsfolk ability, because that's also something that I believe. I don't like, as I have spoken about and am happy to always speak about. I don't like people saying like, oh, this team deserves this team deserves that. That sort of is a very kind of toxic way of looking at the game and at how people are playing from the position of having significantly more knowledge about the game state than anybody who's actually playing the game. And therefore, I think that it is not a good way of looking at the game, and it's not a great way of running the game. But I also believe that townsfolk abilities are meant to, in general, help town. Yes, there's a bit of balancing that you can do with some of them, but overall, they should be used overwhelmingly to assist the town team, in the same way that evil abilities are meant to assist evil, and outsider abilities are meant to interrupt and hinder the good team. Using one of those abilities to just blatantly against the entire point for a single point of balance is also not necessarily a great choice as a storyteller to make.
Right. I mean, I completely agree with you. I was just being the recluse who is registering as the devil's advocate.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there's something to be said about balancing the both of those philosophies, because there are times like that wherein, oh, it's day one and they've just like randomly executed the leech host for no particular reason. Do I use the pacifist? Like, I get a storyteller asking themselves that, and that being a very real question, and having to be like, well, part of my job here is to create a balanced and interesting game. And is it more interesting to let the pacifist save and keep the game going, or is it more interesting to just let this early execution happen, let the game end, and then do a re-rack? That's a very real
Sure.
question that you as a storyteller have to ask yourself. And knowing and understanding your particular group of players is very helpful in being able to answer what way is actually the best way to run that.
Sure.
But in general, I default to townsfolk abilities help town, and using them to hurt town to help evil is most of the time not the right choice.
All right. Yeah, thanks for that. This episode of Script Notes has been steadily devolving into a
Has been brought to
budget.
you by derailment of characters that aren't on the script.
Yeah, it's quite quickly becoming a budget Cult of the Clock Tower, but that's okay. Yeah, okay. Changes to the script. Jamie, we've spoken about various characters. We've mentioned the pacifist, but not in the concept of really the idea of really adding it. We've
We
spoken,
mentioned the pacifist in the sense of don't add it.
yeah, pretty much. We've mentioned the recluse. We've mentioned the mathematician. Are there any of these or anything else things that you've been thinking about adding, or might consider doing so if you plan on revising the script again?
I love the idea of sticking a mathematician on. I definitely think that would help. I also, oh man, I'm a bit torn on something like an alchemist because one of the things I'm thinking about is like I just to preface this with I don't think it would work because I think the marionette's really good on this script and I don't want an alchemist marionette is doesn't work. So I don't think there should be, but I like in theory the idea of it because alchemist plays quite well with DA, Poisoner, and Godfather. Um, quite well is a stretch. Alchemist plays well with Godfather. It plays decently well with Poisoner, bit less so with DA because it can be really good if you're protecting someone good and
Ooh, I
really
actually
frustrating
disagree. I
if
think
you hit.
Alchemist DA is great, and I'm not the biggest fan of Alchemist Poisoner.
Oh, interesting. I think Alc DA is great until you protect somebody who you think is good, everyone else thinks is evil. They try and execute them, and then they don't die because you protected them. That feels terrible for the good team, I think.
Sure,
And
but
that's what I don't like
people not being
about
believed
DA.
and thought they're evil when they're not is just a pretty intrinsic part of the game. Whereas when you have an alchemist poisoner, you've got basically an exorcist with like no clause that they have to pick somebody else. And so once they find the demon, it's just fucking done.
Yeah, that part's true. Like Alchemist Poisoner with a leech would be pretty awful because it's like, oh, I just poisoned them. We can kill them now. But that's the same as like Alchemist Assassin and Leech, which has happened before.
I agree, which is why I'm not
And
the biggest fan of alchemist with
yep.
certain things.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think Alchemist will be cool as more minions are released. I will say that and
I
nothing
can
more
agree with
because
that.
I cannot say more. But yeah, I think Alchemist is a cool character in theory that doesn't quite work with most of the minions that are currently released.
Can
Um,
definitely agree.
but I just like the Alchemist as a character. No, I don't think I should put an Alchemist on this. Yeah, I don't know. I think I I don't I'm curious what y'all would do actually with the outsiders because I know we talked quite a bit about some of the outsiders on here.
Okay, hear me out, Tinker.
Go on.
I suppose I should
Let
probably
if you want.
expand on
I
that.
wanna
You
I
want
wanna
us
hear
to hear
more
you
because
out?
my gut reaction is mixed feelings
Sure.
there.
So, a tinker can you can use a tinker to simulate a godfather if you would like. You can use a tinker to cover up for a puka if the puka poisoned player was the one who got executed. You can use a tinker when a slayer makes a shot, just for funsies. Okay, listen. How is this not the most hilarious situation? The slayer shoots the leech host who dies, and then the tinker dies, and then the leech dies.
You understand the point of this series, right, Nadine?
It's got fun and funny interactions, okay?
I want to throw a character on the script so 3 people can die at once right at the end of the game. It's not the sort of advice that we're here
Yeah.
to give.
Hey, listen, all right. I gave the interesting and helpful interactions for Tinker here first, right? Of covering up for a puka, of simulating a godfather when maybe there's not actually one. And then I went with the really funny thing.
I mean, yeah, Aleo claims Slayer and shoots Navy, and Jamie dies. I suppose the Tinker is
Mhm.
theoretically something that you could put on the script, although with the amount of
Listen,
drunkenness and
Tinker,
poisoning that we've got on the scripts, I'll also just gently nudge back to our conversation about the mathematician if that's going on.
Tinker is the funniest clock tower character in existence. If it's going on the script, do funny things with it.
You know, I've still never killed anyone during the day with a Tinker and BMR. Never done it.
I have definitely killed a tinker during the day at the start of the day, so a godfather gets a kill because holy shit has evil needed the help.
The first all Amni script I ever wrote was based around like the concept of resurrection, and I had an outsider that was called the Stinker. And it was just a tinker that could like unlimited like die and resurrect, and it was very
Oh
funny.
man.
So I would just like kill them and then be like, "Oh, they're alive now. Oh, they're dead again." Great for it was I did it mostly to just like confuse interactions, but it ended up just being like incredibly funny. Not to mention that when you do that in an Omni game, you get a lot of people who are like, "Wait, like was it something I said that like killed them
I
just
picked
based on the timing?"
I picked the Tinker last night, and now sorry, the Stinker last night, and now they're alive again.
Yeah, or like I think it was like someone like said something to that player specifically, and then I killed them, and they were like, "Oh my god, like what have I done?" And I was just like, "Nothing, but you don't know that."
Amazing.
Oh yeah.
All right. Yeah, I think, like I said, the Tinker can be rough with Mathematician, particularly on a script like this. But
Shush, it's fine.
okay, Nathan. Okay.
Listen,
Um,
that is an objective storyteller choice that you have to be like, well, I would have killed the tinker, and most of the time, if you're doing that, it's probably not in good faith. So don't be the storyteller who fucks with your townsfolk players just because you can.
it is, but at the
Only
same
take the
time,
math if you actually would have.
the fact that they're on the script together means that that is something that can happen, right? So that is something that the mathematician needs to take into account, even if the storyteller doesn't do anything about it. Like, for instance, that one game that Capelli ran on this channel, where the leech killed the sweetheart on the final night. The fact that we didn't choose to sweetheart drunk the demon didn't mean that we couldn't have chosen to sweetheart drunk the demon, and you
Right.
therefore had to consider that as part of the game.
Sure. I think part of the game is at least somewhat metaing the storytellers. Like that's just not just metaing storytellers, but also other players as well. That is a part of the game, and sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong. And I don't think there's anything wrong with a little bit of that meta aspect, as long as it's not your like sole form of gameplay or your sole reasoning for anything. There should be other things that factor in as well. But I don't personally have a problem with that, with somebody going, well, mechanically this is possible, but I actually don't think this storyteller would do that because it fucks with the good team in a way that's fairly unsolvable, and I trust my storyteller to be a good enough storyteller to not do that.
Fair enough. So I think some of the problems that we've raised with this script have been with the outsiders, in particular the Goon and the Golem have both been mentioned. Um, the Goon in the context, of course, of being one of three characters that can change alignments. So how would you fix the alignment changing problem?
I would probably, I would certainly take out one of either cult leader or goon, possibly both. There's an argument. Some people, I personally think a script can sustain two alignment changing characters, as long as the storyteller is aware of that and careful with their setup choices. There are some people who honestly prefer that a script have no more than one alignment character, so a changing character. So there's certainly an argument that you could make that you could take out both cult leader and goon and just leave it as a Fangu, and go from there. But certainly I would take out at least one of them.
Yeah, we've spoken about this before. I think the Fangu. I think I'm broadly sympathetic to that way of looking, but I think the Fangu is an exception because it pays a heavy price for an extra evil player, which is losing an outsider and killing an evil player to gain an evil player.
I actually don't think that's that heavy of a price.
I don't know. But yeah, I think it's. I don't have a problem with multiple alignment changes because if Clock Tower was supposed to have only one alignment change per script, the Spirit of Ivory wouldn't exist, right?
Well, I don't like the Spirit of Ivory. I think it's generally used to cover, like, it's like a band-aid when in fact you could just go back and fix the source, right?
I mean, I think it's useful in some situations. I will always put it on the script if it's got a Pit Hagen and Mazephiles on the script, or
Sure.
something like that.
Sure. And I think it makes sense in those situations because the intention of the script there and the minions there is not to do like mez cycling. That's not the intention.
Right.
Whereas I think when you have separate alignment changers like this, all of their abilities are in fact intended to have some alignment changing property to them.
Yeah. So yeah, which of those would you be more likely to remove then, and for what? What are the? I
I
suppose Cult Leader Mathematician is a swap that you've made in Goon for apparently Tinker.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Change one triangle for another triangle, but also if you want to leave on Cult Leader, I think Balloonist. I've talked about that earlier. I don't think Balloonist is really super necessary for the outsider manipulation because there's already 2 others that do it, and there's so much drunkenness and poisoning that a Balloonist might feel a little, pun intended, deflated. I probably wouldn't be too happy
Thank you for
pulling
joining
Balloonist
us.
on
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Script Notes.
So I think you could also potentially leave Cult Leader or swap Cult Leader for something else and just swap, Balloonist for math. And I do think that Tinker has utility here. There's probably other outsiders, I'm sure. We did talk about the Recluse, and I think there's enough things Recluse doesn't fit with that I wouldn't actually recommend Recluse as much as I want to. I don't think Recluse is the right fit.
If you want a Tinker that's just always going to die on the second night, just throw in an Acrobat is fine. I get that. I get there's a leech on. I get there's a leech on the script, but that Acrobat isn't surviving past day 2 wherever they happen to be sat.
I do think there's so much drunkening and poisoning here that an Acrobat, like, wanting to just immediately kill their neighbors as potential leech hosts is less likely on this script.
Right.
But if you consider paring back some of that, which again, I think part of the reason it is so very evil weighted is because there's so much drunkenness and poisoning, and quite a lot of it can't be traced, and that makes it, not impossible to solve, but it increases the difficulty level quite a bit. So if you pare some of that back, then you can end up in a scenario where that is an issue, wherein the Acrobat will just be like, well, we should probably kill my neighbors because one of them's a leech host.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, if you leave sort of the drunkenness and poisoning where it's at, then yep, absolutely an Acrobat if you just want somebody to be dead.
How would you feel about in terms of townsfolk, if you want to remove both the Cult Leader and the Balloonist, an Amnesiac with a view to a focus on Droizen with its ability?
Yeah, that could absolutely work.
I can think of half a dozen Amnesiac abilities, like part-formed Amnesiac abilities that could interact quite well with a few of the characters on the script in terms of like that line
for sure.
of things. How about the evil team? Is there anything you touched there?
Thank you, Lycan, by the way, for the compliment on my pun. I think the demons are all great. To be honest, yeah, I like this evil team pretty well, so I probably wouldn't change much about the evil team. Maybe consider replacing the poisoner and having, the misinformation be just from like everything else. There's an argument that there's enough both good roles and evil roles that there's always going to be some amount of drunkenness or poisoning in play, and therefore you don't actually need a poisoner. You could put that, make that some other minion.
Yeah, I've said before, both here and in other places, that I don't love Leech with a few of these characters. I mean, I still am yet to come around on the Leech in general. I think it's my least favorite demon. But particularly with some of the characters on the script, I think that if I'm an evil player, I'm the saddest if I pull the Leech here. But at the same time, like you say, it's quite an evil-sided script, so for good to have that option is an argument. It just feels a little bit cheap to me. But yeah, so that's the only thing that I would look at. Maybe even throw an extra minion in place of the Leech. I don't know what you think about that. Okay, a witch.
I mean, I like Leech, so I understand the criticisms for it. I understand the fact that it's very swingy. I've certainly had my games as Leech, wherein the person that I hosted was just not a good choice. It's kind of like, on night 1 you're picking blind, and that can be very swingy depending on what's on the script. And again, like I said, there's things on here that can be quite swingy with it. For example, a gossip who does just objectively gossip something that they know should be true, that doesn't go off. But again, there's other reasons to cover for why it might not work, including that they could be a marionette. But like, I've seen a tea lady be hosted before, and that didn't end well for the Leech.
The one thing that I do like about the Leech, of course, being on the script, is that any character that might not die, Sailor, Leech, obviously, Devil's Advocate, Fool, Tea Lady, Neighbor, just claim Leech. It's fine. There's nothing funnier than waking up at the start of the day and saying, "Hey, everyone, I'm the Leech."
That is your favorite thing to do, Alejo, when you
It's
are especially Sailor.
yeah, right.
I remember the first time that you did that and you came to me and said, I'm the Leech and you're my host. And I went, so
I'm the
you're the
Fanku.
Sailor. Got it.
You claim to be the Fanku.
I did, yeah, and I did. I was actually Legion.
You were Legion, yeah. And then we got me executed.
Wasn't I?
Yeah,
I was Legion in that game.
and then I was
Yep.
executed day one, and yeah,
Yeah,
that was a game.
that was
that
was a game.
That was the game where two Legion tried to claim to have seen the Widow right at the start of it, wasn't
it? Possibly.
Yeah, it was just immediately,
Thanks,
obviously.
Discord lag.
Yeah, that was
But
unfortunate.
yeah, you claimed a demon to me, so I claimed a demon back to you.
That was fun.
That was a great conversation. I think chat missed out on it, which is too bad.
Well, now they've heard it, or at least the 14 people who are here, and hopefully the people who watch it back later have now heard it. So yeah, those are our thoughts on some characters that might be changed. So we'll give the last word to you, Jamie. What are you thinking going forward with this script? Will you change anything? Will you take anything that we've said on board in terms of that, or do you have any other ideas?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm honestly torn on the idea of oh my god, what are words right now? Of an amnesiac. Why was that so hard to say?
It's because you
I
forgot it.
absolutely I grr. Um I love the idea of putting an amnesiac on there for the abilities in terms of engaging with the Droizen. I am torn because Vortoxed, poisoned, drunked amnesiacs are like my single least favorite, not single least, but like one of the things I really deeply despise because I think, like a balloonist, poisoning an amni once can just completely ruin their entire like chance at figuring out what the ability is. If I were to do that, I would absolutely run it with a house rule, which is I tend to run Amni with, where the Amni ability and any information they get from the ability or any functionality of the ability is drunked or poisoned, but their actual question and answering is cannot be drunked or poisoned. Like no matter if you are drunk and your ability isn't working, you'll still receive true, sober, non-Vortox correct, healthy information when you ask your questions. So if there was an amnion there, I do think that is how I would engage with that. Um, I definitely think I want to stick a mathematician on it. I don't know if I would do anything with the evil team in particular. I might take the poisoner out just to see how it runs and see if that bounces it a bit more. And if I did take the poisoner out, I would definitely leave the goon in. And honestly, at this point, I might swap the cult leader for an empath because I think good, is going to benefit from having that support. And yeah, I'm mixed on the balloonist. I remember putting the balloonist on and being like, this is more outsider modification than it is like actually a townsfolk who's getting good information. And that maybe doesn't feel great for the person who draws that token. So
And
I
like
do
I
think I
said, I
would,
also think not needed
yeah.
because you've got two other outsider manipulators on here.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that goes back to a conversation that we were all having at a separate time that like when people think about outsider modification on scripts, there's so much like, oh, outsider modification. So I have to have this and this and this. And then you look at the base scripts and it's like TB has a Baron, SMB has a Fangu and a Vig, like BMR has a Godfather, and like they all only have one and you don't really need more. So yeah, I do think that like considering that, I would be very open to taking the balloonist off, putting a mathematician on, and then maybe empath for cult leader, potentially a house ruled Amni. Yeah, yeah, lots of possibilities here.
Yeah,
I do think it would be fun to come up with an iteration of it that's less evil sided because I actually think it's a really cool script, and I haven't played a lot of scripts that try to accomplish the same thing of like lots of drunk but lots of power to solve that. And it's very specific type of clock tower game that like appeals to what I find fun. So
For sure. All right. Is there anything else that anyone wants to say about the script? Covered most of it. This has been about an hour longer than expected, but that's fine. Yeah. We usually run a script the day after we've spoken about it on the Tuesday stream. There is no regular Tuesday stream because, as you may well be aware, in a couple of hours, I'm going to be going live for 24 hours. So that'll be fun. However, because of that, we have plenty of games that we're going to be playing. So, Jamie, if you are around at any point, I would like to run this script as is tomorrow.
yeah, go for it. I will try and pop in when I'm free. It
Awesome.
is really fun. It's just I'm just warning you that the only time Good has won it, to my knowledge, was a cult leader win on day one.
Amazing.
But apparently our stream needs more evil wins, so that's okay.
That's true. That is true. It's a good script for it. So yeah, we will be running this script at some point in the next 24 hours. Don't know when. We'll see. Is there anything else that either of you want to say about not the script? Anything in particular? Amazing.
Watch the
And
24-hour stream.
please do. We'll see you in an hour and a half. But thank you to Navian for doing this with me as always.
Oh.
And thank you to special guest Jamie, who you can catch with me every week, every Tuesday.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Go check out Navian at all of the places that they are, which they will now list without forgetting any of them in perfect order.
Oh boy. Okay. Right. So Friday is Connecticut Blood on the Clock Tower, and on Sundays I'm on Jamie B02C, and on Monday, but not today, but next Monday maybe, will be Bardic Puppy. That is me and Ekin. We trade off doing, who's co-hosting. And since I'm planning on being on the 24-hour stream, it is Ekin's turn to co-host.
And
Here every other week.
And
Oh God, what did I forget?
And also here on Fridays with me. Just before the
Oh right, yes, of course. Fridays before the Connecticut stream.
Fridays before
stream.
Yeah, where we play not Blood on the Clock Tower. It's good fun. All right.
I'm sorry for forgetting you, Alejo.
I'm used to it.
No.
All right. Thank you to both of you again, and thank you to everyone who has stuck with me through the technical difficulties. Hopefully, if you're watching this on YouTube, they will be resolved. I don't know. Hopefully, it won't be a stuttery mess, but it'll be uploaded. In whatever form it exists, it will be uploaded. Thanks for sticking with me, and I'll see you, those of you who are with me live on Twitch. I'll see you in an hour and a half. We'll throw over to what's left of the World Cup game, missing pieces. And to everyone watching at home, see you on a Tuesday, a Friday, or a Sunday here at Alejo F Black on Twitch. Good night.
Bye.